I'm Lycan, a gamma who has been rejected multiple times. When I met the Lycan King Xander, I thought it was just another doomed encounter. I offered him the chance to reject me, but he firmly refused. His eyes were filled with determination and longing, as if telling me that our bond was unbreakable. As we interacted, I began to realize that maybe, just maybe, this time I could truly find my own happiness. Would you like to do it, Your Highness, or should I? She looked at the Lycan King indifferently, whose lilac eyes of affection were suddenly intruded by confusion. What do you mean? He asked as he tried to concentrate on the beautiful voice of the woman in front of him, his mate. He was here for a meet and greet session that he dreaded. The worst thing was that this session among alphas, lunas, and their gammas from every pack in existence was to last for the entire night. Why couldn't they just skip this night and officially start the 1-month collaboration tomorrow? The king thought to himself every year. She raised her eyebrows as she studied his expression. Huh. You do look genuinely confused. His eyebrows furrowed, confused and irritated now. Again, what do you mean? And what is your name? The alphas, lunas, and the best warrior of each pack, called gammas, just arrived, and he, as their benevolent king, was here to greet them. Although, if he were given a choice, this king would have rather been going through the reports of rogue attacks that were steadily piling up on his desk. He couldn't wait to get the night over with. If he made his rounds quickly enough, he would still reach home on time to get through 3 or 4 files before bed. But when he walked through the doors of the gathering hall, his impatience, reluctance, and pure hate for the meet and greet vaporized in an instant. My name is Lycan Frisia Pa, Your Highness. I take it that you're going to do it then? She said simply. To the king, her name felt like the first spring breeze after many long months of harsh winter, the soft light penetrating through the gray clouds, the breath of life in a cold, dark world. Do what? His confusion couldn't be masked even if he tried. He felt like his mate was already 10 feet away, when he had only taken the first step. When he entered the hall, every wolf and Lycan present looked in his direction, and they either nodded or bowed, but he merely glanced over them. The animal in him was following a scent that has never graced his nostrils. Butterfly pea and jasmine. What a unique combination, he thought to himself. His footsteps gained speed as the scent got stronger. Then he stopped right behind a 5'1" brunette. Her back was small, half of it covered with dark, luscious curls falling effortlessly from her head. There was only one word in his mind, mate. The figure started turning around to face him, and his heart stopped. She was surprised by his sudden presence, and took a step back. The animal in his head growled, Mine. Lycan turned around because she noticed the stunned faces of her Alpha and Luna, who both bowed in her direction. Upon turning, she came face to face with a white suit covered with a black tuxedo, and a strong scent of acacia wood and forest trees graced her nostrils. Shocked at the proximity, she took a step back to see who it was. Realizing that the dark-haired man with slightly tanned skin and lilac eyes was the king himself, she understood her pack leader's action. She, too, bent her knees and lowered her head as a form of respect to the highest ruler of all werewolves and Lycans. A warm feeling crept up her shoulders before she felt the sparks where his hands made contact with her skin. To her dread, she realized that the man in front of her was her mate, who spoke in his clear, deep voice. You don't have to do that. Please stand. Don't bow to me, he said with visible pain and disapproval in his eyes. Although surprised by the king's response, Lycan couldn't escape her reality of how the bond was going to end. Here we go again, she thought, before proceeding to ask whether he wanted her to do it, or that he wanted to do it himself to reject her. Do what, Lycan? Talk to me. His voice was soft but demanding. His eyes were desperate and lost. She explained calmly, Reject me, Your Highness. Do you prefer it if I did it, or would you like to do it yourself? The hope and life she gave him earlier seemed like it was about to be snatched away from him almost as soon as he found them. The king's lilac eyes turned onyx as he growled thunderously, scaring everyone who was there. The room fell into dead silence. After he exploded in anger at what he had just heard, the king asked in a low, frightening tone, Why the F***ck would either one of us reject the other? Lycan was surprised again, but she remained calm. She shrugged and said, I don't know. Maybe it's because I'm not your type. Not good enough for you, not pretty enough. You may already have a chosen mate to be engaged to. Before she could finish, her Luna hissed, Stop it, Lucy. The king's eyes met the Luna's as he growled, I didn't ask you to speak. The Luna and her alpha mate lowered their heads in unison, as a sign of apology. No right-minded wolf would challenge a Lycan, let alone the king of Lycans. The king faced his mate again. His eyes softened a little by how dainty and beautiful she looked. Why did she want to take herself away from him? He asked in a murderous tone. Who told you those things? Lycan's eyes turned wide abruptly. Oh no, Your Highness. That's not what I meant. It's just That's what my previous mates told me before or after they rejected me, so I was just giving you an idea on what I'm talking about. His angered eyes bore into her unperturbed ones as he asked in a dangerously low tone. Do you want to reject me? She took a moment to think. No one had ever asked her this question. That's a very difficult question to answer, Your Highness. I don't even know you. I admit that there is the mate bond for now. And I do acknowledge that I feel the sparks, but whether I want the rejection, I honestly don't know. But then again, what I wanted never really mattered. My previous mates pretty much decided it for me. That, or they made my decision easy. I do prefer an earlier rejection when there are no memories made as of yet, because it would hurt much less. Does that make sense, Your Highness? Xander responded firmly, No. And stop calling me Your Highness. You are my mate and I am yours. The mate bond is there for now and forever. The sparks will get stronger. And neither of us are rejecting the other. There was fury in his voice but also desperation. Desperation to not lose his mate when he had just found her. Desperation for her to accept him and stay with him forever. She nodded grudgingly once and bit her bottom lip as she dove into her own thoughts. He sighed. His eyes were gaining back their lilac shades as his fingers reached for her chin and lifted it up gently for their eyes to lock. What are you thinking about, Lucian? His voice no longer held anger, only gentleness and guilt. She opened her mouth to say something, but closed it after a second thought. She smiled meekly and shook her head slightly before she said, I was just thinking about the ceremony tomorrow. That's all. Lucian. He reached for her cheek this time as he said, I'm sorry I yelled at you, but don't lie to me please. Tell me, what were you thinking about? Her eyes dimmed as she looked at the ground, and Xander felt his heart clenching by her saddened look. She composed herself and muttered, I can't understand why you won't reject me. Because you're my mate, he yelled, not that it helped. In a room filled with lycans and werewolves known for their sharp hearing, it was without a doubt that everyone heard their king. Okay, she said meekly and forced a smile. No one had to tell him that she was unconvinced by how he felt about her. But why would she doubt him? The mate bond was supposed to automatically signify love and commitment. Why didn't she believe him? His hand suddenly had a mind of its own, as it began tracing her right arm in hopes of soothing her and chasing away her doubts. When he felt the unevenness of her skin, he wasted no time taking a step to her side to examine the cause. There was a 5-inch scar. Injuries and wounds could heal, but for some brutal attacks and accidents, a scar would remain. The king's eyes darkened again, and he growled so loudly that the werewolves around them took a step back as they held their heads low. What is it? Lucian frantically asked, equally alarmed. She felt the scar on her arm with her left hand, but she wasn't sure what the fuss was about, so she looked at the king in confusion, whose onyx eyes were still glued there. He pushed her left hand away gently and started tracing the scar with his fingers. Lucian fought through the pleasurable sparks erupting from that area. With his eyes still fixed there, he asked in a low homicidal tone, Who did this? Lucian shrugged. It was just the rogues. 5, maybe 6 years ago. It's just a dried up part of the skin, isn't it? His dark eyes never left the part of her flesh that was once torn so badly that its appearance never healed. He then locked eyes with Lucian as he asked in dismay, How are you okay with this? Your Highness, that? What? Don't call me by my title or my full name. It's just Xander to you, Lucian. He insisted. She hesitated. Xander, she began, clearly not used with this manner of addressing the king. A scar is normal among warriors, more so among gammas. If you check the bodies of the other gammas here today, you'll find that many of them have scars as well. Some may be worse than mine. I know a few alphas and a handful of lunas who have such scars from fighting alongside their pack. This really isn't a big deal. He listened to her words, and his eyes softened at how she shoved her own ordeal aside to put other warriors and pack leaders under the spotlight of bravery. No one knew that at that time. Whatever Lucian said only made their king more certain that there was no one more qualified to lead alongside him as his queen. His heart ached when his gaze returned to the scar on his beautiful mate. When he bent down and was close to kissing it, Lucian abruptly retracted her arm as she uttered, Perhaps that is not the most appropriate thing to do, given this setting. He had completely forgotten about the people around them. He only saw her. With those words, he was pulled back into reality. He smiled, making the Lycans in the room stunned. The king never smiled. Never. He then said, You're right. I would like to meet your pack leaders, Lucian. Introduce us. Of course. She smiled and waved her Alpha and Luna over. They walked towards the king and bowed, their heads still facing the ground as Lucian said, These are Alpha 1 and Luna Hale of the Blue Crescent Pack. You're high, Xander. She abruptly decided against addressing Xander by his title when she saw, from the corner of her eye, that he was about to make a fuss. Heads up, leaders of the Blue Crescent Pack, Xander said with a smile. When their heads were raised, Xander thrusted out his hand in Alpha One's direction. I want to personally thank you for leading the rogue attack up north last year. The rogues would have continued to wreak havoc if it weren't for your pack's leadership and contribution. The king remembered reading a report on the successful annihilation of one of the strongest rogue packs in the previous year, and had long known the Blue Crescent Pack was at the forefront of the victory. It was said that this pack held the trust of the other packs, and was respected for the leadership displayed. There were many testimonials from other pack warriors who thanked the Blue Crescent Pack, saying that they had learnt a lot in terms of strategy and combat. Alpha One and Luna Hale were both stunned by the king's graciousness. It was no secret that one should just be grateful to not get killed. It was not customary for the king to hand out praises. One took the king's hand and shook it once before he admitted sheepishly, "As your subjects, we are more than grateful to assist in your endeavors, your highness. But my Luna and I cannot take credit for the success last year. We may be the largest in size in our pack, but our Gamma Lucy," one motioned in Lucian's direction, before continuing, "was the strategist, the best trainer and warrior, be it on the battlefield last year, or within our own pack. I'm her subordinate when it comes to training. She was the one who led us to victory." Lucian was biting her bottom lip. When she knew what one was going to say, she tried to stop him through their mind link, but he didn't bother listening to her. Her eyes were fixed on the ground as she prayed for the moment to be over. She couldn't see it, but Xander's eyes beamed with admiration for her. When he noticed that her eyes were pinned to the ground, he frowned and asked in concern, "Lucian, what's wrong?" She shook her head slightly and responded meekly, "Nothing. Just tired." He nodded in understanding. Most wolves had to travel a long way to Lycan territory, so it was a given that they would be drained when they arrived. He turned to face everyone as he announced, "My fellow subjects, I thank you for making the trip here. Let this night be the beginning of a worthwhile collaboration between packs and species. Please have some food if you haven't already. I would like to meet every one of you. Give me a few minutes. I will be right back to thank every pack who has assisted me these past few years. Enjoy the evening." The speech left everyone surprised. The king was never this welcoming. It was no secret that he hated this night every year. But now he was not only welcoming them with open arms, he promised to thank the helpful packs personally. Disregarding the stares, he turned to Lucian and said, "Lucian, you should get some rest. Let me walk you back." She looked at her pack leaders in panic, but one said, "We'll be fine, Lucy. Go. You hardly slept last night." Xander's heart clenched again with Juan's words, but he chose to say nothing. When his hand fell on Lucian's small waist, she gasped and stiffened but made no move to push it away. So, he left his hand there as he led her out of the hall. As soon as they were out of the building, Xander asked, "Why didn't you sleep last night?" "Border duty." She answered simply. "How is it that you had border duty the night before you were bound to travel?" "The available members were either sick or had a family to look after. I didn't want to flip anyone's schedules upside down over this, so I stood in place." She shrugged. Her selfless answer exuded the nobility of a queen, his queen. But something still bothered him. "Lucian, why were you uncomfortable when your alpha gave you credit for last year's success? Why didn't you just thank him and accept the praise?" She snorted, and looked him dead in the eye as she declared, "I didn't do it for the praise, your HG. Handar. When Alpha One got the request, I made it a point to my warriors that the ultimate aim of the battles was to keep innocent wolves safe. I drilled this thought into their heads day in and day out. They were to fight to protect, to fight with honor and nobility, not for the sake of pleasing anyone of a superior position." He listened to the strength of her voice, and his lips curled up as she continued, "I didn't accept the praise because I didn't do it for that. I didn't do it for you either, Xander. I respect you as my king, but I didn't fight the rogues for you. I fought for those who couldn't fight. That's why I didn't accept the praise. I never will, so don't try to get me to do it." His animal howled internally with immense joy and pride. He and the Lycan in him could not thank their goddess enough. They were completely over the moon that the moon goddess bonded them to a goddess. Noble, selfless, brave, beautiful. What piqued his interest most was her confident admission that she prioritized the lives of innocent wolves, that she had never met over her ruler, who everyone was obliged to please. But somehow she still seemed unreachable. He felt that she didn't allow herself to get as close to him as he wanted her to. Then there was that confusion about her willingness to reject him, or have him reject her. What was that about? Why would she ask for something like that? He then recalled that she mentioned her previous mates. So she was rejected more than once before. But why would she think that he was like the rest of them? He was not a wolf. Surely, Lycans were more known for their unwillingness to deny the mate bond, weren't they? He admired her side profile in silence, taking in the most beautiful creature he had ever laid his eyes on. He hoped to learn everything about her one day, but for better or worse, he was dead certain that he would never let his mate go. When they reached the hotel where they housed a portion of wolves, Lucian was surprised that Xander still insisted on following her until they reached her room. He stared at her scar with a frown as she unlocked the door. "Thank you for walking me back. Have a good night, Xander." Her sweet voice brought his gaze up to hers. She took only one step into her room when Xander grabbed her by her wrist and lifted her hand to his lips. She stiffened in shock as he planted a deep kiss on the back of her hand, sending a strong wave of sparks through her arm and then her entire body. He was still holding her hand when he locked eyes with her and uttered, "Good night, Lucian." She retracted her hand and entered her room before shutting the door behind her. Xander stood in his spot, where he heard her sigh after she closed the door. He then heard cupboard doors opening and closing before her footsteps moved across the room, where he heard a second door being shut. After some shuffling sounds, he heard the water from the shower, and the Lycan part of him was aroused by the thought of his mate naked in the bathroom. He walked away from her door in quick steps before his self-control evaporated. He could easily break the hinges and knock down the door if he wanted to, ignoring his whimpering animal, who would rather skip the meet and greet and spend the night with their mate. He returned to the hall and started making his rounds. He found it amusing when pack leaders and warriors displayed their surprise after he expressed his gratitude to them. There were several self-entitled alphas and snobbish lunas, who tried and failed lamentably to be noble as they humble bragged. Xander started taking an interest in scars on his subjects' bodies. The warrior from the Blood Eclipse pack, Gamma Radin, had a scar on his face tracing down to his neck. If the scar went a little higher, he would have been rendered blind on one side. "How did it happen?" the king asked in concern as he gestured to the scar. The warrior smiled graciously as he explained, "A rogue attack 5 years ago, Your Highness. Our pack was attacked, and we formed alliances with Blue Crescent and White Blood to eradicate the rogues." "Were many injured?" the king asked. "We lost 2 wolves in the final attack, sadly, but the death toll was higher before our alliance. Although it's displeasing to the eye, I must admit that this scar only brings me joy," he said with a smile. The king's curiosity was piqued. "What do you mean by that, Gamma Radin?" Radin glanced at his pack leaders before he explained. "When the rogues attacked, some of us who had an above-average strength took on more than 1 rogue at a time. When I kept taking on 2 at a time, the rogues took notice. All of a sudden, I found myself surrounded by 5 of them. One held me by my tail, and its member slashed me from the side and gave me this scar." He gestured to his face before continuing. "When the blood from my face was oozing, the gammas from our ally packs pounced in and tore the rogues apart, leaving the rogue who slashed me for me to chase before I tore its throat." Radin smiled. "The scar brings me joy, because it has been a long time since I knew I could count on someone from another pack to watch my back. I'm not an alpha, and I'm not a member of their pack. They had no obligation to save me, but they did." The king listened attentively before he confirmed. "Blue Crescent and White Blood, you say?" "Yes, Your Highness," Radin said with a slight bow, and added, "The warrior from White Blood is Gamma Tobias Tristan, and you've already met the warrior from Blue Crescent, Gamma Lucian Pa." The king nodded. Gamma Radin then glanced at his leaders again, who both have doubtful expressions. He cleared his throat, and with visible fear in his eyes he began, "Your Highness." "Yes, Gamma Radin?" The king obliged with an encouraging smile. The Gamma said cautiously, "I wasn't standing very near where you were when you met Gamma Lucian, so I'm not sure if what I heard was what I heard." He hesitated. "You mentioned that Lucy is your mate?" "I did, and she is." The king responded with a smile. Despite the tint of jealousy, he felt from the way this warrior called his mate Lucy, with such affection. Gamma Radin nodded and said, "I'm not sure if you're going to kill me for what I'm about to say, Your Highness. But as I said, I owe her my life, so I think this is going to be a fair trade." He chuckled once before saying seriously, "Your Highness, I beg you don't hurt her. She is a good person who, for some unknown reason, was forced to go through with more than most." The king's eyebrows were furrowed. He felt insulted. Why would this Gamma think that he as Lucian's mate couldn't take care of her? Who the hell did this wolf think he was? The king tried his best to keep his composure and declared in a serious tone, "I would never even think of hurting her. She's my mate. I would start a war before I let her get hurt." "That's good to know. It's been an honor to meet you, Your Highness." Gamma Radin bowed. The king smiled flatly and said, "Likewise, members of Blood Eclipse. Do enjoy the rest of the evening." He walked away in quick steps as he felt the jealousy overtaking his body, when Radin expressed so much concern for Lucian. If he stayed any longer, he might have killed Radin. When he was speaking to Aluna, who was running her pack after the death of her husband the previous month, Xander felt a hand run down his arm seductively, making him turn his sights to glare at the creature. He asked in a dangerously low tone, "What the hell are you doing?" It was the daughter of his defense minister, Sasha Cummings, who smiled coyly at the king, making Xander angrier. "Sasha," her father called out as he approached them. The king growled again. "Should your daughter interfere in one of my conversations again, we'll have to discuss your future and hers, Cummings." Sasha was left stunned but opted to say nothing, and held her head low as her father bowed and apologized. "I'm terribly sorry, Your Highness. I should have been more alert. We'll excuse ourselves now." The king's glare remained on them until they were far enough for his comfort. He thought about Lucian to calm himself before turning back to the Luna, whom he was speaking to, and said, "I apologize for the interruption, Luna Lissa. We were talking about the construction works for a training ground in your pack, if I'm not mistaken." Luna Lissa didn't expect an apology from the king, and was quite surprised by the sincerity from his words. When the king remembered where they left off in their conversation, she was more encouraged to show her enthusiasm when she spoke about her plans to mandate every able pack member to fight. The king supported her and encouraged her to submit an application should she need help in terms of finances or trainers. She thanked him and promised to keep his offer in mind. When he left Luna Lissa, Alpha One and Luna Hale approached him hastily and nervously. They stood before him and bowed. "Heads up, pack leaders of Blue Crescent. To what do I owe this pleasure?" Their raised heads were met with the king's smiling eyes. No king in history was known to find meeting werewolves a pleasure, and no Lycan would bother offering a smile to their species, let alone the king himself. Alpha One glanced at his mate, who nodded encouragingly. The Alpha looked at the king and spoke doubtfully. "My Gamma is your mate, Your Highness?" Now he was getting pissed off. His eyebrows furrowed as he said, "She is. Is there a problem?" Alpha One muttered a wow under his breath before speaking. "Your Highness, please understand I mean no disrespect for whatever comes out from my mouth next." He cleared his throat and continued, "If you're not serious about having her," he swallowed a lump in his throat before proceeding, "please let her go. I don't want to see her hurt by the mate bond again. I've known her since we were kids. She's like a sister to me. It pains me and my Luna to see her hurt." If Alpha One didn't have a mate, Xander was dead certain that he would have ripped the Alpha's throat right then, and they're out of pure jealousy. Gamma Radin had already emptied his patience reservoir, and Xander was clinging on to the thread of patience he had left for the night. "Why would you think that I'm not serious about Lucian, Alpha One?" he asked, taking some comfort in saying her name. Alpha One said, "My king, I admit that I don't know your intention with Lucy. Having just met you today, I have to say that I don't know you at all, so I cannot tell how this mate bond is going to progress. All I wanted to say is that," he sighed like he was going to make one of the biggest mistakes of his life, "she has gone through too much in one lifetime. Please don't hurt her." Alpha One looked like a man ready to receive his punishment after he finished speaking. Xander was impressed with what Lucian was capable of doing with her very existence. In one night, 2 wolves were ready to be punished just to tell him not to hurt her, and one was an alpha. He chuckled at his own thought before meeting Alpha One's confused look as he declared, "Alpha One, my intention with Lucian is to court her, mate and mark her and only her, have her mark me, and make her my queen. I don't know what I did to have you and Gamma Radin think that I will hurt my mate, but I can assure you that I can never bear to see Lucian hurt, let alone hurt her." He chuckled darkly before muttering, "If anything, she hurt me with what she said tonight." Luna Hale then stepped forward cautiously and explained, "Your Highness, please forgive her. It's not in our position to speak about her past, but if she decides to tell you one day, you'll understand why she said the things she did." Xander nodded in understanding as he listened to her speak nervously. He then added with a smile, "You both need not be so afraid of me. I wouldn't punish or kill without a proper basis. Logic and legality aside, I wouldn't dream of killing my mate's pack leaders who are just trying to look out for her." There was a moment of surprise before they bowed to display their gratitude. Xander moved on to the next pack, and 2 more after before he took his leave. When Xander arrived home, he made himself go through one file in the rogue stack before turning in for the night. He looked to the side of his bed, and he imagined Lucian lying next to him. His hand subconsciously reached for the empty pillow, and felt the coldness on its surface. His animal whimpered, missing their mate. He thought about being able to see her the next day, and fell asleep with a smile. Lucian got out of bed at 4 a.m., brushed her teeth, dressed up and grabbed a bag with a water bottle before making her way to the ground floor, and exited the building through the back door. She jogged to the nearby forest behind the hotel, and stripped behind a tree. After placing her clothes in her bag, she shifted. Her white wolf with sapphire eyes had an unusual feature, a striped tail of white and gray, She never knew why. She scoured through any book she could find on the oddities of werewolves, but there was nothing on striped tails. Those who had seen her form always pointed out this peculiarity of hers. Some said she had an unknown gift, others said she was cursed. It never bothered her in terms of functionality, so she just shrugged off these comments. When her paws hit the grassy ground, she held onto her bag in her mouth and ran into the forest. The cool breeze was invigorating. The gentle rustling of the wind was a sound she loved, and the endless rows of trees drew her deeper and deeper into the forest. She only stopped when she heard the gushing sound of water from a river. There, she sat by the riverbank and looked at her reflection. Lycan then stared at the sky and took a deep, satisfying breath of freedom. She did this every morning back in her pack. The stillness gave her the space to clear her head. The quietness offered her some peace. The first ray of light was her cue to dash back. She ran through the forest from the path she came from, shifted back to her human form, dressed and entered the building before taking the elevator up to the 7th floor. As soon as she walked out of the elevator and turned around the corner of the corridor, she heard the sound of heavy footsteps coming to a halt. Lycan was scrolling through her phone as she walked, so she didn't see who it was. Suddenly, her body was tugged forward, and she slumped into something hard. Oof, goddess, I was so worried. Where were you? The person who had his head buried in her hair exclaimed. Lycan pressed her hands on the hard surface of his chest to part their bodies, and when she felt the sparks and registered the scent of acacia wood and forest trees, she realized that it was the king. When their gaze locked, she saw worry, relief and some anger in his eyes. Oh, it's you. Good morning, Xander. He gently tugged a stray hair behind her ear as he asked, Where did you go this morning, Lycan? I went for a run in the forest at the back. Why? Did something happen? She asked. Xander pressed their bodies together once more, and the sparks intensified. He then buried his head in her neck as he whispered, I couldn't hear anyone in your room, and your scent in the corridor was faint. I thought something bad happened to you. Don't do that to me again, Lycan, please. I can't afford to lose you. The sincerity in his voice pulled at her heartstrings, but she reminded herself of her previous mates and remained calm as she uttered, I'm sorry that I worried you, but there aren't any attacks around here, are they? No, he whispered into her ear, and his warm breath tickled her skin as he continued. But that doesn't mean I would be any less worried if I didn't know where you were. She tried to keep herself composed as she uttered, You could have asked Ethan. He saw me leave. Xander's body stiffened, and his grip on her shoulders tightened as he pulled away to look at her face. His eyes were fierce, and his tone was laced with jealousy as he asked, Who is Ethan? With furrowed eyebrows, Lycan answered simply, The guard at the back door. 6 feet. Dark. Short hair. He is a guard of this place, isn't he? Or you could have asked his partner, Benjamin. He guards the front, but I think he saw me leave from the back this morning. Xander's body relaxed, and he smiled in bliss as his thumb traced her cheek. He thought about how amazing his mate was to learn the names of the hotel guards. The king chuckled lightly for no reason other than how happy he felt when he was with her. Lycan's phone beeped, pulling her gaze to the screen. She then looked back at the king and asked, Was there anything you need? I have to get ready for breakfast. I should get there before my Alpha and Luna. He took a glance at her phone when she held it up, and saw that it was a reminder for her to get ready. He was so worried that he hadn't noticed she was in a tracksuit. He reluctantly released her as he said, I won't keep you. I should go get ready as well. I can't wait to see you at breakfast, Lycan. She managed a polite smile and walked past him. He watched her unlock her door and disappear from view when the door closed behind her. Xander was rooted at his spot for another 5 whole seconds before he entered the elevator and left the building like a grinning monkey. For once, he contemplated what he would wear for the day. He never really cared about clothes. When one is in a position of power, subordinates will bow to you regardless of what one wears. But now, he wanted to look his best for his mate. After putting on a teal-green shirt and finishing the look with a black tuxedo, he ran his fingers through his dark, thick hair a few times until he was satisfied with the way it looked in the mirror before leaving his room and driving to the dining hall. The moment he stepped into the hall, everyone who was present bowed his way, and the initial chatter died down instantly. He caught sight of the person he was looking for, and felt a pang in his heart when she too had her head down and knees slightly bent. The king forced a smile as he announced, Heads up, everyone. Please help yourself to food and drink. Wolves, you need not wait for the other Lycans to arrive. As far as I'm concerned, both species are of equal importance. Please start. Some older Lycans were particularly displeased by what their king just said, but most of the younger ones were pleasantly surprised. Many whom the king had spoken to the night before walked up to him with the sole purpose of greeting him. It feels different, he thought. In previous years, wolves and lycans would approach and greet him, but it always looked obligatory. This year, he felt their sincerity oozing when his subjects wished him good morning. He made a beeline to his mate, who had her back against him when he was approaching her. She was speaking to Luna Lisa, who was listening attentively until the Luna noticed his presence and bowed in greeting. "My king. Good morning." Lucian turned ever so gracefully in her turquoise dress. The sleeves reached her elbows and covered her scar. There was a glass of water in her hand. Her head was beginning to tilt downwards when Xander held her shoulder and lifted her chin up as he pleaded in a whisper. "Lucian, you don't need to bow to me, please. It really hurts me when you do that." Lucian was shocked to hear that the king was hurt to see her bow to him, but she stubbornly muttered, "It would be rather odd if I don't though, especially when everyone else's heads are down." He smiled and reached for her cheek as he said firmly, "It won't be odd because you're my mate. I will not have you bow to me." With that, he took her hand and lifted it up to his lips before pecking a sweet kiss on the back, and said, "You look beautiful." He had offered her the same gesture the night before, but that didn't mean Lucian was any less shocked. She tried to say something. Thank you, Xander." He never knew his name could sound so good until it came out from his mate's lips. "Sit with me for breakfast?" he asked with hopeful eyes. She hesitated and glanced at Luna Lisa before she asked, "Can I have a few more minutes with Luna Lisa? We were just finishing up our discussion." "Of course." He grinned, once again feeling proud of her selfless nature. "Apologies, Your Highness," Luna Lisa said. He waved his hand in the air with a smile and said, "No need. It brings me great joy to see a fruitful exchange." His graciousness and understanding earned him a smile from Luna Lisa and Lucian. He got lost in his mate's smile and moved closer to her before slipping his arm around her waist. Lucian gasped softly and tried to ignore the sparks and warm sensation from his arm and hand. She then cleared her throat and spoke to Luna Lisa about her training plan. "Luna Lisa, you need not worry about the Blood Eclipse pack. I can assure you that they are nothing like the rumors being spread about them. They are fierce, yes, but that's only because they have to be when the rogues attack. We're all like that when we fight. Their alpha is understanding and generous. He will help you. Would it be possible for you to introduce us at tea later? I was hoping that, since he knows you, he'll be more willing to offer his warriors to train our pack." Luna Lisa suggested. "That wouldn't be a problem at all, Luna Lisa. I should also introduce you to Luna Lovelace from the Midnight Pack. Their warriors are very well trained as well, and their pack isn't very far from yours, so perhaps you would want to consider collaborating with them in the future." Lucian smiled and uttered in response, "That would be wonderful. Thank you, Lucian. It's so wonderful to finally make your acquaintance after hearing so much about you. I won't keep you now." "Likewise, Luna Lisa." Luna Lisa bowed to Xander once more before taking her leave. When she was far away enough, Xander whispered into Lucian's ear, "It's so difficult to not fall in love with you after seeing you do that." She shrugged and muttered, "I was just helping." "Helpful and humble," he uttered and smiled, offering her his hand as he said, "Come, let's get something to eat." She nodded and hand in hand, they made their way to the buffet table. The wolves and lycans stepped aside when they saw their king approaching, but His Royal Highness insisted that his subjects took their food first, as he happily waited in line. Lucian sighed with relief when he did this. He knew. He didn't want her to feel uncomfortable about being a royal. More importantly, he didn't want her to feel uncomfortable being with him. Seating was free, but there was an unspoken rule that wolves could not sit at a table if a Lycan was already sitting there. So both species sat among their own. When Lucy placed her plate on an empty table, Xander pulled out the chair for her and uttered, "If you like, you could have your pack leader sit with us." Really? Her eyes sparkled, sending an electric spark through his being. Of course. His lips curled up as he chuckled lightly. Her eyes glazed over when she mind-linked Alpha One and Luna Hale. Within moments, they arrived at the table and bowed to the king before taking their seats. Conversation with the king started out careful and polite, but when Xander took an interest in Alpha One's efforts to challenge ruthless alphas to take their packs and give better care to the pack members, the atmosphere around the table eased considerably. Cold as he may seem, the king felt touched when Luna Hale talked about how the pack, under her supervision, took care of the new pups from the packs they took over, especially if they had lost their parents. She personally adopted 5 of them, and said that she would have continued to take in more had it not been for Alpha One's firm objection. "I can't allow her to do it, Your Highness. I really can't. We already have 3 of our own, and I love the 5 we have taken in, but any more than that, and we may have to build a hotel for a pack house," Alpha One said, earning a playful slap on his arm from his mate. Lucian giggled, capturing Xander's attention. He thought her voice was the most beautiful thing he had ever heard, but her laughter sounded even better. He wanted to hear more of it. Xander looked at Alpha One with a smile and said, should Luna Hale decide to take in any more pups in future, Alpha One, do let me know. I'll happily contribute financially to building the hotel. Both Luna Hale and Lucian laughed at Alpha One's terrified look. He looked nothing like the stern, scary Alpha that many packs described him as at that moment. Alpha One cleared his throat before suggesting, Your Highness, perhaps we should strike a deal. For every pup we take in, you should too. It was the king's turn to look terrified, and he looked at Luna Hale and jokingly said, Please forgive me, Luna Hale. I'm afraid I must take your Alpha's side on this. You should stop at the number of pups you already have. Alpha One smirked victoriously in his mate's direction, and Luna Hale said in mock anger, You spineless traitor, Your Highness. Lucian and Xander were about to laugh when a low growl came from behind them. How dare you speak to our king like that, you wolf? Alpha One and Luna Hale flinched visibly in their seats. Lucian froze, but Xander was furious. Who dared speak to them like that? His head turned. His murderous eyes saw that it was Cummings, his defense minister. His daughter, Sasha, was right behind him with a man next to her. Is there a problem, Cummings? Xander growled. Your Highness. Cummings bowed. Should I send security to deal with this she-wolf? As if on purpose, he said it so loudly that half the hall turned in their direction. Alpha One stood, his body shielding his mate as his dark eyes bore into Cummings. Xander growled furiously, obliging Cummings and the two behind him to bow. He said in a clear tone, These people are my guests. I will deal with you before you have a chance to deal with anyone without basis. But Your Highness, she accused you of being a traitor. He argued, and Sasha gasped in mock surprise from behind. Did you partake in our conversation? Did you hear what we were talking about? Everyone flinched at the king's outburst. And no, Your Highness. Then how would you know the context in which we were speaking? Cummings shook visibly as Xander announced. For clarification's sake, our conversation trailed around humor. What your defense minister just heard was simply a joke. If he didn't manage to decipher that, I must say that I'm worried about allowing him to continue being the one to protect my people. Murmurs filled the room as everyone started throwing disapproving looks at the minister. Cummings bowed lower and uttered, 1,000 apologies, Your Highness. It won't happen again. I misunderstood. I apologize for my mistake. Xander glanced at Lucian, whose eyes of displeasure were fixed on Cummings, before he looked back at his minister and said loudly, Don't apologize to me. Apologize to Luna Hale, the wolf you've wronged. There were audible gasps, even Sasha's, which was genuine this time, but their king was unperturbed. Since Lycans were the more superior species, it was completely unheard of for a Lycan to respect a wolf, let alone apologize to one. Cummings raised his head only slightly. He was about to say something, but when he saw the king's murderous eyes, he faced Luna Hale and gritted his teeth as he uttered, Please forgive me, Luna Gale. It's Hale, Minister. Lucian's irritated voice echoed in the space between them as she remained seated. Pardon me? Cummings asked, surprised by the remark from a tiny wolf, whom he did not recall ever meeting. He arrived late the previous night, so he didn't know who she was. Alpha One then said darkly, It's Hale with an H. Cummings was getting agitated until Xander's cold voice rang through his ears. How can you call yourself a Lycan if you can't even hear a name correctly, Cummings? Cummings aborted his plan to retort the wolves, and bowed in their direction as he said, My apologies, Luna Hale. I misunderstood and misspoke. I hope you'll forgive me. Luna Hale glanced over Cummings with disdain before she locked eyes with Xander, and stood up with poise and grace as she said in her Luna voice, Thank you for clarifying the situation, Your Highness. Otherwise, there would be a severe misunderstanding among our species that may take too much time to mend. I can assure you that that won't happen on my watch, Luna Hale. He smiled, and he looked around the hall as he said, Everyone else as you were. Cummings and the two behind him turned and walked away, towards the buffet table. Alpha One, who was still standing, thrusted out his hand and thanked Xander for resolving the confrontation. Xander shook his hand graciously as he said, You need not thank me. Right now, I'm embarrassed to even admit that he is one of my ministers. When they both resumed their seats, Lucian turned to him with her bright eyes and whispered, Thank you, Xander. Really? The shine in her eyes and her adorable smile ignited a fire in Xander's heart. He leaned over to whisper in her ear, Don't thank me, Lucian. It was the right thing to do. He took advantage of their proximity and pecked a kiss on her cheek, sending a visible blush to it, and he chuckled at how her body responded to his gesture. They continued their meal. Then, Cummings came around the table with the two who followed him. Xander was speaking to Alpha One, but when he noticed Lucian's eyes wandered to the side, he turned to see the minister standing before them sheepishly. Forgive our intrusion, Your Highness. May we sit with you? Perhaps we'll take this opportunity to make amends for my poor behavior earlier. The king smirked. That's not for me to decide, I'm afraid. He looked at Alpha One and said, Alpha One, the discretion is yours and your Luna's. I have no qualms even if the minister's presence is refused. Alpha One's gaze turned gentle when he asked his Luna. What do you think, baby? Xander envied how sweet the couple before him was. He could only hope that he'll be allowed to call Lucian his baby soon. He hadn't even begun calling her Lucy yet. He didn't mind taking it slow, so long as she was comfortable. They were clearly mind-linking until Luna Hale smiled meekly and said, Perhaps we should take this opportunity to make amends. Thank you, Luna Hale, Cummings said, and dropped into the seat next to Alpha One. Lucian. A deep voice came from behind her. Lucian turned around, and when she saw who it was, she stood without a smile and greeted the Lycan. Sebastian Cummings. It's a pleasure to see you again. Sebastian looked uneasy as he trembled over his words. It's good to see you too. How have you been? You look beautiful, by the way. Xander was practically shooting daggers with his eyes at the man, who was talking to his mate with such yearning. He only managed to control himself, because he saw how uninterested Lucian was. She responded in a flat tone. I've been doing well, thank you. If you can excuse me, I would like to finish my meal now. Before she could turn back around to sit and resume eating, Sebastian exclaimed. No. Lucian, wait. He was about to reach for her arm, but her agility enabled her to step back before he caught hold of it. Xander leaped out of his seat and growled as he stood in front of Lucian, shielding her from Sebastian. The word mine was at the tip of Xander's tongue, but he didn't want to take that choice from Lucian. He remembered the previous night, when she was reluctant to consider being with him for the rest of her life. He didn't want her to feel like she was coerced to give in to the mate bond. Your Highness, Sebastian looked startled. He peeped at the indifferent Lucian before bowing to the king and said, I apologize. He then moved to sit in between his sister, Sasha, and his father. Sasha was sitting right next to Xander. She wore a backless bright red dress showing a lot of cleavage. In Lucian's head, she was rolling her eyes. What some females would do to get the attention of the opposite sex, she thought. So Lucian, what have you been up to since last year? Sebastian asked as he poked into the food on his plate, breaking the awkward silence at the table. Xander tensed up, but next to him, Lucian shrugged as she avoided Sebastian's soft gaze and responded. The usual. Training. Fighting. Teaching. Sasha started speaking animatedly. Oh, it must be awful to have to learn all of that. It takes away so much energy and time. Lucian blinked at Sasha's comment, and cocked her head to one side as she said, I can't think of a better way to spend my time and energy, but I do acknowledge that everyone has a different set of priorities. Xander smiled at his mate's diplomatic response. Oh yeah, I know about that. Being the daughter of the defense minister, I can't really escape the importance of combat. But given the choice, I'd rather settle down with a mate and have his babies, not having to worry about safety and all of those things. Lucian smiled flatly in her way. Not having to worry about safety is a viable priority, I suppose. Alpha One covered his mouth to hide his smile. He and his mate had known Lucian for so long that they could recognize her sarcasm from a mile away. In fact, Sasha was the only one at the table who seemed oblivious about it as she continued. I know, right? And I must say, you are so brave to sit next to our king. I mean, most wolves I know would shun away from Lycans. And for what? I don't know. But here you are, next to the strongest Lycan. Don't you feel small? Before Lucian could speak, Xander asked coldly, why should she feel that way? Her eyes brightened when she met Xander's cold ones as she chuckled lightly before explaining. Well, your highness. Not to brag, but we are a superior species, so. Superiority in size and strength is no match for a superiority in character. Xander said, oh, such wise words from our king. She laughed coquettishly. Lucian sipped her water as she wondered whether she could escape this unwanted exchange. In the end, she only hoped that her Alpha and Luna would not leave her alone with the Lycans. Luna Hale seemed to have read her mind as she mind-linked. Don't worry, Lucy. We'll be here as long as you need us. Thank you, Luna. Sasha then leaned in a way to show her cleavage as she asked, so, what have you been up to, your highness? Work. He replied flatly as he looked at the wall ahead and sipped his drink. Oh, you work so hard for us. It almost makes me feel bad as one of your subjects. What do you do for rest? Sleep, he said equally uninterestedly, and Lucian almost snorted at his emotionless response. Sasha then whispered. Want some company for tonight? Lucian bit her lip and intertwined her fingers as she hid her hands on her lap, under the table to cope with the familiar feelings of rejection before Xander said, No, I don't. And even if I do, it won't be with you. Despite his firm tone, Lucian still felt uncomfortable. Xander noticed this, and it made his animal whimper to see their mate sad. With pain in his eyes, he leaned towards her, and was about to say something when Sebastian asked Lucian, "Would you like to take a stroll in the park later, Lucian? The arellises are in full bloom this time of year. It's a beautiful scene." "No thank you, Mr. Cummings. I've seen them." He seemed defeated, but persisted to speak to Lucian. "Would you like to sit with us during the ceremony later this morning?" "No thank you. I'll be sitting with Alpha Juan and Luna Hale. We can make room for a few more. Our seats are nearer to the front, so you would all have a better view of the stage." Sebastian offered with a small smile. Xander then said, "You need not worry about their view. I have invited Lucian and her pack leaders to sit with me at the front row. They were about to respond to my invitation before your father showed up at our table." Of course this was a lie. Disregarding the three Cummings' stunned looks, Xander's eyes softened with tenderness when he turned to Lucian and asked with a charming smile, "What do you say, Lucian? Would you join me at the ceremony?" She managed a small smile and nodded slightly as she uttered, "Sure, Xander." "What did you just call His Highness?" Sasha hissed in anger. Xander glared at her and said, "It's my name. Do we have a problem, Miss Cummings? Since when were we allowed to address royals by their names so casually? Especially a king. As one of your closer associates, Your Highness, it is my duty to advise you." "You are in no position to advise me." Xander's cold voice cut Sasha off before she finished speaking. Ignoring Sasha, Xander turned to Alpha Juan and said, "I hope you and Luna Hale can join us? It would be our honor, Your Highness." Alpha Juan accepted graciously. Minister Alfred Cummings then started looking at Lucian with interest. "Young lady, I don't believe we've met." Lucian responded without missing a beat. "We have met, Minister. We met 3 years ago at the defense meeting in New York, when we revised the laws to mediate with the hunters. 2 years ago, I asked you about the rumors circulating among packs about rogue Lycans, to which you responded by asking me to worry about my own species instead. And last year, I was introduced to you again by Sebastian Cummings at this event. When I asked which packs were the most vulnerable to rogue attacks at that time, you asked me to go around the hall on my own, to find out which of them may need our help." Alfred Cummings glanced uneasily at Xander, whose face was getting darker with each of Lucian's statements. He cleared his throat before he said, "Perhaps you have mistaken me for someone else, miss." "I don't think. My gamma is not mistaken, Minister. I was in attendance as well." Alpha One confirmed Lucian's account of the events with confidence. Alfred Cummings opened his mouth, but he could argue further. His son spoke meekly from his side. "Dad, you have met her. She's not mistaken." Alfred's displeasure was evident with his son's express statement. His son could have just mind-linked him, but he chose to embarrass his father before the king, and some pesky wolves instead. Alfred forced a smile and addressed Lucian. "Well then, I must apologize for not remembering you. Old age does not serve the memory, I'm afraid." Xander's eyebrows were furrowed with disgust as he spoke. "How could you give such an answer to our people?" Seemingly unperturbed, Alfred said, "Your Highness, in my defense, I meet many people daily, so that wasn't what I meant." Xander spat. "Excuse my language, but why the he*L did you ask our subjects to worry about their own species? Do you think they would be safe if Lycans went rogue? Do you think they were just asking to badmouth Lycans, and not because they are concerned for their pack's safety? And the thing about asking them to find out which packs needed help by themselves?" He shook his head. "Honestly, Cummings, why would we need you?" The king sighed in frustration as he ran his fingers through his hair. His animal wanted to be released to tear the old man into pieces. His bright purple eyes were turning onyx. He was on the verge of losing his cool. Then, a small hand reached for his clenched fist that was on his lap under the table. It sent a trail of sparks into his body, and when his onyx eyes met Lucian's comforting black orbs, she mouthed calm down. She started stroking his fist with her thumb to soothe his animal and him. His animal purred under her touch, and he let his fist loosen and unfold. Their mate bond calmed his simmering anger. Holding onto Lucian's hand gently, he pondered in silence for a moment before his low voice rang around the table. "Cummings, I'm giving you one more chance in the name of my late father, who trusted you to the bone when he was alive. Take your job seriously, or you can forget about holding this position any longer than you already have. I will do my best to make amends and serve our people, Your Highness," Alfred said as he restrained himself from glaring at the members of the Blue Crescent pack. Lucian retracted her hand and stood. Xander's eyes shot up at her retreating figure, feeling the loss of skin contact with his mate. His animal was already whimpering inside his head. Before he could say anything, she looked at him and said, "The ceremony starts in 15 minutes. I need to use the restroom first. Hope you don't mind that I excuse myself now." Luna Hale exclaimed, "Oh gosh, I didn't realize the time. I need to use it as well." Alpha One stood from his seat after checking his watch. Xander followed suit and gazed dreamily at Lucian as he said softly, "I'll wait for you in the front row. Don't take too long." "Okay." She returned his smile and turned to the Cummings family as she said, "It has been interesting to speak to three of you. Please allow us to excuse ourselves." She left with her pack leaders before any of the Cummings could speak. Xander wouldn't have minded if she had left without a word to the three of them. In fact, he would have been quite happy if she had ignored them after the incompetence Alfred Cummings showed. But her sarcasm when she used the word interesting made his lips curl upward. "Thank you, Moon Goddess," he thought. He didn't spare any of the Cummings a glance as he walked out from the other way and entered the auditorium at the end of the hall. He greeted his ministers on the way to his seat, and the king sat right in the middle of the front row. As he waited for Lucian to return, he reminisced the pleasure he felt when her hand touched his. He didn't expect her to make a move, but he was close to instability at that moment, and if she hadn't calmed him down, he may have shifted in the middle of the dining hall. When Lucian exited the restroom, she came face to face with Sebastian Cummings.